Kate Morrison stood at her weapons station aboard the U.S. Defender, watching the alien ship grow larger on the main display. The massive vessel gleamed like polished chrome in the starlight, making their own ship look dull and outdated in comparison. She checked her console readings for the third time in 5 minutes, a habit formed over 12 years of service. The first contact meeting was supposed to be peaceful. That's what they all thought when the Zrelak ships appeared at the edge of human space 3 days ago. Their technology was clearly advanced, sleek ships with energy shields that seemed to bend light itself. They requested a diplomatic meeting, and humanity eagerly accepted. Weapons Officer Morrison. Status report. Captain Alan Reed's voice came from behind her. He sounded calm, but Kate knew him well enough to hear the tension underneath. All systems nominal, sir. Traditional railguns primed, energy banks at full capacity, she replied, keeping her voice steady. The crew had trained for first contact scenarios, but the real thing made everyone's nerves tingle. The communication screen flickered to life, revealing the Zrelak ambassador. The alien's silvery skin reflected the light of their bridge, and its 4 eyes blinked in an unsettling pattern. "We appreciate your greeting party, humans," it said through the translator. "Though we find your defensive measures amusing." Kate felt her cheeks flush. The alien's tone carried the same condescension she'd heard from bullies in grade school. "Our weapons are purely precautionary, Ambassador," Captain Reed responded diplomatically. "Standard protocol for any naval vessel." The Zrelak made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Such primitive technology. Projectile weapons, physical ammunition. We abandoned such barbaric tools centuries ago. Kate's eyes narrowed as she studied her readings. Something wasn't right about the alien ship's defense screen. The energy pattern showed unusual gaps, like they'd never needed to defend against certain types of attacks. The alien ambassador continued its mockery. "Your species still relies on throwing metal fragments at high speed. How do you ever expect to join the galactic community with such outdated methods?" "We find our methods quite effective," Captain Reed replied, his patience wearing thin. More alien laughter filled the bridge. "Effective? Your most powerful weapons would barely scratch our lowest grade shields." See, the alien ship's shields flared brightly, showing off their supposedly superior technology. That's when Kate saw it. The pattern in their defenses. They were optimized entirely for energy weapons. She quickly typed notes into her console, documenting the shield harmonics. The Zrelak had evolved their technology in a straight line, abandoning physical weapons completely in favor of energy-based systems. "Captain," she said quietly, "request permission to run a full defensive analysis." "Granted," Reed replied, equally quiet. The Zrelak ambassador was still talking, but Kate barely heard it. She was too focused on the readings pouring across her screen. Their shields were incredibly advanced against energy weapons, but they showed virtually no adaptation for kinetic impacts. It was as if they'd never needed to defend against physical projectiles. Kate's heart raced as she compiled her findings. The aliens' arrogance might be their weakness. They'd advanced so far in one direction that they'd left themselves vulnerable to humanity's supposedly primitive weapons. As the diplomatic meeting continued, with more patronizing comments from the Zrelak, Kate kept gathering data. She had a feeling humanity would need this information soon. Very soon. The aliens might be laughing now, but Kate Morrison had learned one vital truth about warfare. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. And if she was right about their shields, those old ways might just save humanity when the laughter inevitably stopped. Peter Hawthorne rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the data scrolling across his screen. 3 days had passed since the disastrous first contact, and he hadn't slept much since Kate Morrison sent him the shield analysis. The engineering lab aboard the U.S. Defender hummed with activity around him as other engineers worked to understand the Zrelak technology. "You need to see this," he called out to his assistant. The young engineer rushed over, coffee cup in hand. "Look at these shield harmonics. They're completely focused on dispersing energy weapons, but there's almost no protection against physical impacts." The data from Kate's weapons station painted a clear picture. The Zralak had developed their defensive technology along a single path, never looking back. They had forgotten about the simple effectiveness of kinetic weapons. Peter pulled up an old file from the ship's database, specifications for 20th century rotary cannons. The GGU-8 Avenger, in particular, caught his eye. Simple, reliable, and devastatingly effective. His mind began racing with possibilities. "Sir," his assistant pointed at a new alert on the screen. "The Zralak just attacked our outpost near Saturn. Energy weapons only. They cut through our shields like they weren't even there." Peter nodded grimly. "But did you notice what they didn't use? No missiles, no railguns, nothing physical." He pulled up a simulation program and started inputting data. They've evolved past kinetic weapons, but that might be their biggest mistake. The next few hours flew by as Peter and his team worked frantically. They modified old weapon designs, adapting them for space warfare. The math was promising, very promising. A rotary cannon, modified for vacuum operations, firing depleted uranium rounds at 3,000 rounds per minute. The Zralak shields would have no way to stop it. "Get me Captain Reed," Peter said, his voice urgent. Minutes later, the captain's face appeared on his screen. "This better be good, Hawthorne. We're about to evacuate the Mars colony." Peter shared his screen, showing the weapon designs and shield analysis. "Sir, we've been thinking about this all wrong. We don't need to match their energy weapons. We need to go old school." He explained his findings, watching the captain's expression change from skepticism to interest. The Zralak's overconfidence in their technology had left them vulnerable to simpler attacks. Their shields could stop a plasma bolt or laser blast, but they had no defense against a storm of tungsten rounds moving at hypersonic speeds. "How fast can you build a prototype?" Reed asked. "Give me 48 hours. We already have the basic materials in storage. The hard part will be modifying the firing mechanisms for space combat." Reed nodded. "Do it. And Peter, keep this quiet. If we're right about this, we don't want the Zralak to know what's coming." Peter spent the next 2 days in a blur of calculations, welding, and testing. His team converted a cargo bay into a makeshift workshop, bringing old weapon designs back to life with modern twists. They added magnetic acceleration to the rotary barrels, modified the ammunition feeds for zero gravity, and reinforced everything to handle the massive stresses of sustained fire in space. As he watched the first prototype take shape, Peter couldn't help but smile. The Zralak thought humanity was primitive for keeping these old weapons around. They were about to learn that sometimes the old ways were the deadliest. Sometimes progress meant remembering what worked in the past. The future of humanity might depend on a weapon design older than space travel itself, and Peter Hawthorne was going to make sure it worked perfectly. Commander Steve Duncan watched the battle footage again, his jaw tight with anger. Another human colony had fallen to the Zralak. Their energy weapons sliced through defensive shields like hot knives through butter. The death toll was rising every day. "Play it again," he ordered the computer, focusing on the moment just before the colony's defenses failed. Something about the Zralak attack pattern caught his eye. Their ships always maintained the same distance, never coming too close to their targets. The door to his office slid open, and Peter Hawthorne rushed in, carrying a tablet. "Commander, the prototype is ready." Steve nodded, eyes still fixed on the battle footage. "Tell me something good, Peter." "Better than good," Peter said, setting his tablet down. "We've modified 6 GAU-8 systems for space combat. The test results are beyond our best expectations." He pulled up the test footage, showing a rotating barrel assembly unleashing a stream of depleted uranium rounds into a salvaged piece of Zralak hull material. The rounds tore through the alien metal like it was paper. No energy shields, no fancy deflectors, just pure kinetic force doing what it had done for centuries. "How soon can we mount them on ships?" Steve asked, already thinking about tactical applications. "That's why I'm here. We need a test run, A real combat situation. But we need to do it quietly. Peter lowered his voice. If the Zrylak figure out what we're doing, they might adapt their shields. Steve thought for a moment, then pulled up a star chart. There's a small Zrylak patrol near Jupiter's orbit. 2 ships, minimal crew. They've been harassing our supply lines. He pointed to a cluster of dots on the screen. We could take the U.S. Defender out for a routine patrol with the new weapons. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Steve supervised the installation of 2 modified GAU-8s on the Defender's hull, carefully hidden behind retractable panels. The crew worked in silence, understanding the importance of secrecy. All hands, battle stations, Steve announced as they approached the patrol zone. This is not a drill. Weapons Officer Morrison. Status on our special packages. Ready and eager, sir, Kate's voice came back over the comm. Both units show green across the board. The Zrylak patrol appeared right on schedule. Their sleek ships glowed with energy, shields shimming in the sunlight. As usual, they transmitted their standard message of superiority. Primitive humans, your presence is not welcome here. Retreat or be destroyed by superior technology. Steve smiled grimly. Kate, prepare for close-range engagement. Peter, monitor the weapon systems for any issues. The Defender moved forward, appearing to flee. The Zrylak ships followed, just as Steve had predicted. They were so confident in their shields that they never considered it might be a trap. Now, Steve ordered when the aliens were in perfect position. The hull panels slid back, revealing the modified weapons. Kate triggered both systems simultaneously. The space around the Defender lit up with streams of hypervelocity rounds, each one moving faster than the human eye could track. The Zrylak never had a chance to react. Their energy shields, designed to stop plasma and laser fire, might as well have been tissue paper against the storm of depleted uranium. The rounds punched through their hulls, shredding their ships from bow to stern. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. Both alien vessels drifted in space, riddled with holes. Steve felt no joy in the victory, but he knew they had just changed the course of the war. Send word to command, he ordered. Tell them Project Rainmaker works. Tell them we can fight back. As the Defender turned for home, Steve watched the wreckage of the Zrylak ships fade into the distance. They had proved that humanity's primitive weapons still had their place in modern warfare. Now they just had to hope they could produce enough of them before the Zrylak realized what was happening. Lieutenant Amy Walsh stared at the tactical display in the U.S. Defender's war room, her fingers tracing the patterns of Zrylak ship movements. Something about their attack formations had been bothering her for days. The aliens always arranged their ships in perfect geometric patterns, like dancers following a strict routine. They're not adapting, she muttered, marking another point on the display. The Zrylak had lost 6 ships to Project Rainmaker in the past week, but they hadn't changed their tactics at all. Their arrogance was so deep that they refused to believe primitive weapons could be a real threat. The ship's intercom crackled. Lieutenant Walsh to the bridge. Emergency situation developing at Proxima Colony. Amy rushed to her station, arriving just as the main screen lit up with urgent distress signals. A massive Zrylak fleet had appeared near the colony, larger than any they'd seen before. Status report, Captain Reed demanded. 30 Zrylak warships, sir, Amy replied, studying her readings. But they're maintaining their standard formation. They still don't know about our new weapons. The captain nodded grimly. How many modified GAU-8 systems do we have installed? 4 units operational, sir. Peter's team finished the latest installations yesterday. The U.S. Defender wasn't alone this time. 2 other ships, the Liberty and the Valiant, had also been equipped with the modified weapons. Together, they formed the first battle group of Project Rainmaker. Amy's mind raced as she analyzed the situation. The Zrylak's perfect formations were actually their weakness. They never expected attacks from close range, always relying on their energy weapons and shields for long-distance combat. Sir, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, I have a plan. but it's risky." The captain gestured for her to continue. Amy pulled up a tactical display, showing her proposed attack route. The Zrilak always maintain the same distances between their ships. If we time it right, we can split their formation and take them out in groups. It was a dangerous plan. They would have to get much closer to the alien ships than usual, right into the heart of their formation. But if it worked, they could protect the colony and prove that Project Rainmaker could handle large-scale battles. The next hour was tense as they positioned their ships. The Zrilak, still confident in their superior technology, merely watched and waited, probably expecting another easy victory. "All ships in position," Amy reported. "Ready on your command, sir." Captain Reed took a deep breath. "Lieutenant Walsh, you have tactical control. Make it count." Amy's fingers flew over her console as she coordinated the attack. The 3 human ships accelerated suddenly, diving straight into the gaps in the Zrilak formation. The aliens, surprised by such an aggressive move, took precious seconds to react. "All ships, open fire," Amy ordered. The space around them erupted in streams of depleted uranium rounds. The modified GAU-8s roared to life, each one spitting out 3,000 rounds per minute. At point-blank range, against ships that never expected physical ammunition, the effect was devastating. Alien vessels split apart under the onslaught, their energy shields useless against the storm of metal. Their perfect formation became their doom, as ships trying to escape crashed into each other in their panic. In less than 10 minutes, it was over. The mighty Zrilak fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage, and Proxima colony was safe. Amy finally allowed herself to breathe normally again. They had just proved that Project Rainmaker could work on a large scale. The Zrilak weren't invincible after all. They had just forgotten that sometimes the simplest solutions were the best ones. Captain Greg Mitchell walked through the massive production facility on Mars, watching as automated machines assembled modified GAU-8 systems around the clock. The success at Proxima Colony had changed everything. Now every human ship was being fitted with what they called Rainmaker weapons. The sound of rapid footsteps made him turn. Kate Morrison, now promoted to weapons commander, hurried toward him with a tablet in her hand. Her face showed both excitement and concern. "The Zrilak are finally starting to react," she said, showing him the latest battle reports. "They're trying to adjust their shields, but they still don't understand what they're really facing." Greg studied the data. The aliens had modified their energy shields to pulse at different frequencies, probably thinking that humanity had developed some new type of energy weapon. They still hadn't grasped that their enemy was using simple physical ammunition. "How many ships do we have ready?" he asked, walking past a row of newly completed weapon systems. 15 fully equipped with Rainmaker systems," Kate replied. "Another 20 will be ready by the end of the week. Peter's team has even developed a new loading system that can handle longer engagements." The factory floor shook slightly as a massive cargo ship landed outside, bringing more raw materials from Earth. The production of depleted uranium rounds had become humanity's top priority. Every mining facility and manufacturing plant was working at full capacity. Greg's communicator buzzed with an urgent message. Multiple Zrilak fleets detected approaching the inner solar system. At least 60 ships. This was it. The aliens had finally decided to launch a major assault. But this time, humanity was ready for them. "Send word to all ships," Greg ordered. "Execute Operation Thunderstorm." The next few hours were a blur of activity as Earth's defense fleet assembled. Greg took command of the U.S. Vanguard, the first ship built specifically to carry multiple Rainmaker systems. Kate joined him as tactical officer, her experience with the weapons proving invaluable. The Zrilak fleet appeared exactly where their intelligence suggested they would, their ships glowing with enhanced energy shields. Their transmission came through, filled with the usual arrogance. "Your recent victories were merely flukes," the alien commander declared. "We have analyzed your new energy weapon and adapted our defenses. Surrender now." Greg shared a knowing look with Kate. The aliens still didn't get it. They were so convinced of their technological superiority that they couldn't imagine being beaten by simple physics. All ships, battle formation, Greg commanded. Remember your training. Close range, maximum effect. The human fleet moved as one, executing the tactics that Amy Walsh had developed. Instead of holding back at energy weapon range, they charged straight in, catching the Zrylak off guard once again. All ships, open fire. The space around them, filled with streams of hypervelocity rounds. 60 ships equipped with Rainmaker weapons, each one firing 3,000 rounds per minute. The effect was beyond anything they'd seen before. Zrylak ships shattered under the onslaught, their enhanced shields just as useless as the original ones against physical ammunition. Their formation fell apart as they tried desperately to adapt to an attack they still didn't understand. Greg watched the tactical display as ship after ship registered confirmed kills. They were no longer just defending. They were pushing the Zrylak back, proving that humanity's primitive technology was more than a match for alien arrogance. Send word to Earth, he ordered as the last enemy ships retreated in chaos. Tell them the tide has turned, and tell them to keep those production lines running. The Zrylak will be back, and next time they'll be desperate. The battle was over, but Greg knew the war was far from finished. Still, as he watched his fleet regroup, he couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, the old ways really were the best ways. Colonel Lisa Bennett looked out the window of her command center on Luna Base, watching Earth's defense fleet prepare for their biggest operation yet. Every ship bristled with Rainmaker weapon systems, their hulls reinforced to handle the massive recoil of sustained fire. The Zrylak have pulled back to their core systems, her intelligence officer reported. They've lost 40% of their fleet in the past month alone. Lisa nodded, studying the massive holographic display showing enemy positions. The aliens had finally started to realize something was wrong, but they still hadn't figured out exactly what humanity was doing. Their pride wouldn't let them believe they were being defeated by projectile weapons. Peter Hawthorne's voice came through on the command channel. Colonel, the new Mark I Rainmakers are ready. We've increased the rate of fire to 3,500 rounds per minute, and the new targeting systems can track multiple targets simultaneously. Good work, Lisa replied. How are we doing on ammunition? Every ship has enough for 3 hours of continuous fire. The automated factories on Mars are running at full capacity. Lisa turned to face her staff. The command center was a hive of activity as officers prepared for Operation Hammerfall, humanity's first push into Zrylak territory. After months of defensive battles, they were finally taking the fight to the enemy. The Zrylak think they know what's coming, she told her officers. They've modified their shields again, added new energy dispersion systems. They still think we've developed some kind of super advanced energy weapon. A smile crossed her face. Let them think that. Their arrogance is our greatest advantage. The fleet launched the next morning. 100 ships, each equipped with multiple Rainmaker systems, formed the largest human battle group ever assembled. They moved in formation toward the first Zrylak border system, following the attack plan Amy Walsh had developed. The aliens' response was exactly what Lisa had predicted. They formed their traditional geometric patterns, their ships glowing with enhanced shield systems designed to stop energy weapons. Their transmission was typically arrogant, but Lisa detected a note of uncertainty in their voice. Your crude attacks will fail against our improved defenses. We have analyzed your weapons and adapted. All ships, battle formation Delta, Lisa commanded. Remember your training. Close range, maximum effect. Show them what humanity's primitive weapons can really do. The human fleet split into smaller groups, using the tactics they had perfected over months of combat. The Zrylak tried to keep them at long range, firing their energy weapons in massive barrages, but the humans pressed forward, taking hits on their reinforced armor. All ships, weapons free. The space between the fleets filled with streams of depleted uranium rounds. The Mark I rainmakers performed perfectly, their increased fire rate turning space itself into a storm of metal. Zrelak ships began breaking apart under the assault, their enhanced shields still useless against simple kinetic impacts. Lisa watched the tactical display as the battle unfolded. The aliens tried to adapt, tried to change their formations, but it was too late. They had spent so long laughing at humanity's primitive technology that they had forgotten how to defend against it. "Push forward," she ordered as the enemy line broke. "Don't let them regroup. Show them that humanity isn't some primitive species to be mocked. Show them what 3,000 rounds per minute really means." The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the first Zrelak border system had fallen to human forces. It was just the beginning. Lisa knew the real fight was still to come. But as she watched her fleet secure their position, she knew humanity had proved something important. Sometimes the simplest solution was the best solution. And sometimes being primitive wasn't a weakness at all. Admiral Paul Richardson stood on the bridge of the U.S. Vanguard, watching as the combined human fleet approached the Zrelak homeworld. 6 months of constant battles had led to this moment. The aliens had finally realized what they were facing, but it was too late. Multiple enemy contacts, Kate Morrison reported from her tactical station. "They've gathered every ship they have left. Over 200 vessels." Paul studied the tactical display. The Zrelak fleet had arranged itself in a sphere around their homeworld, their ships glowing with energy as they powered up their latest shield modifications. No more arrogant transmissions now. They had finally learned to fear humanity's primitive weapons. "Status of our Rainmaker systems?" Paul asked. "All Mark IA units show ready." Peter Hawthorne replied from engineering. "We've distributed the new tungsten core rounds to all ships. They'll punch through anything the Zrelak have left." The human fleet moved into attack formation, 150 ships, each bristling with multiple Rainmaker systems. They had come a long way from that first encounter when the aliens had laughed at their weapons. "Send the message," Paul ordered. The communication officer nodded. "Broadcasting now. Zrelak Command, this is your final chance to surrender. We have no desire to destroy your civilization." The response came quickly, but it wasn't what they expected. Instead of more arrogance, the Zrelak commander's voice showed genuine confusion. "How? How did you defeat our superior technology with such primitive weapons?" "Our shields can stop any energy weapon ever created." Paul smiled grimly. "That was your mistake. You thought technology only moved in one direction. You forgot that sometimes the old ways still work best." There was a long pause before the Zrelak responded. "We will not surrender. We cannot accept defeat by a lesser species." "All ships, battle formations," Paul commanded. "Remember your training. Let's finish this." The human fleet split into their attack groups, using the tactics that had won them battle after battle. The Zrelak tried to keep them at range, their energy weapons filling space with deadly light, but humanity had learned how to handle that. "All ships, commence firing." 300 Rainmaker systems opened fire simultaneously, each one spitting out 3,000 rounds per minute, filling the space around the Zrelak homeworld with streams of hypervelocity metal. The aliens' final defense line began to crumble. "They're breaking formation," Kate shouted. "Their shields are failing." Paul watched as ship after ship shattered under the onslaught. The Zrelak tried to adapt, tried to find some way to stop the storm of metal tearing through their fleet, but they had no defense against such primitive weapons. "We surrender." The transmission cut through all channels. "Please, we surrender. No more." "All ships cease fire," Paul ordered. The streams of metal stopped, leaving only drifting debris where much of the Zrelak fleet had been. Hours later, Paul stood in the Zrelak High Command Center, watching as their leaders signed the formal surrender. The aliens seemed smaller now, their arrogance replaced by a new understanding. "We believed we were superior," the Zrelak leader said quietly. "We thought we had evolved past physical weapons. We forgot that simple solutions can still be the most effective." Paul nodded. Perhaps that's the real lesson here. Progress isn't about abandoning the old ways. It's about knowing when to use them. As he looked out at this Rilak homeworld, Paul thought about how far they had come. From that first mockery of humanity's primitive weapons to this final surrender, the aliens had learned a hard lesson. Never underestimate a species just because their technology seems simple. Sometimes, 3,000 rounds per minute was all the advanced technology you needed.